Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope everyone's doing well. I'm just going to wait like a minute or two just to see if anyone shows up today. And if no one does, that's totally okay too. I'm going to be covering a very important topic that's pretty important to me. So yeah. Hey, Delton, good to see you, man. Good chatting with you, I think 2 or 3 days ago. So today we will be covering basically like an important topic for me. And I kind of know a lot of people that have this, and also I've had it myself, and that's kind of like anxiety. And basically as it relates to anxiety, and basically as it relates to your health and fitness goals. So it's an important topic, and it's important to always, like, whenever you have like a health goal, a fitness goal, or aesthetic goal, to be able to basically comprehend the fact that, Michael, good to see you. Comprehend the fact that, you know, the human being is like a system of systems. Just like a company needs various departments to be able to function appropriately, basically the human body is the same exact way. It has many different systems that are responsible for different tasks. And if any of those systems kind of fall into like a huge deficit, they drag all of the physiological and psychological systems down in your body. And eventually it leads to sickness, disease, obesity, and then eventually death if it lasts long enough. So oftentimes people, when they kind of approach it in isolated ways, like just kind of targeting one thing in particular, kind of going after symptoms, you rarely see these people change. So I'm trying to get people out of that mindset of just seeing the human being as like individual systems instead of a system of systems that all works in synchrony with one another. So today we're going to be talking about anxiety, and then kind of how it relates to fat gain in your health and fitness goals. So it's very important to obviously have a lot of context, okay? Because a lot of times when you kind of seek information online, including my information, I'm not excluding myself from this. Raul, good to see you. Yep, Raul, good to see you. Hope you guys are having a good weekend, including my information. If you just go online on like a random YouTuber or like a random health guru and kind of watch their videos, you have to remember they never like actually met you. So any advice they're giving is just kind of like a blank statement. So if you kind of take it out of context, I mean, that advice could hurt you, okay? Could hurt you, it could help you, or it could just simply not do anything. But context is very important. It's kind of like the same thing as like when you go to a doctor, they obviously at least talk to you for like 5 minutes, figure out what's going on, then prescribe you a medication. But what happens is when you go online and seek advice, these people never met you. So it's kind of basically what's going on is like the doctor would give you medication before they even met you. And that doesn't make any sense. Before they met you, talked to you, they're like, before they even spoke to you or even seen you, they're like, oh, here, take this. Like, it wouldn't make any sense at all under that context. But it's basically the same exact thing that's happening on going on the internet or social media and seeking advice there. Because if you take things out of context, it might actually be good advice if you knew the context in which it should be used in, which very few people do. But if you take it out of context, then it could be a huge detriment to your health. So having said that, I'm just gonna throw in basically like a case study, okay? So at least we know who we're working with. So let's say a person, this is what I would personally do. So let's say a person came in, they're like 40 years old. Let's just say they took their body fat, they're 28% body fat, which is actually like an average body fat range roughly of like the average American. So for males, like 20% is considered overweight. 25% is considered obese, and 30% and above is considered morbidly obese. Just to give you kind of a perspective, like I'm 15%. So obviously 15% body fat roughly. So obviously most people, Albert, good to see you. So obviously most people are much heavier looking than I am. So you can imagine the body fat percentage of the average American, which according to my estimates, like especially since I used to take like a ultrasound of a lot of people's bodies to test their body fat, the average body fat percentage is about 27% or so. So that's considered obese by normal standards. So we're dealing with a person that's basically 40 years old. They're, let's say, 28% body fat, and they have like a few other things going on. So here's what I personally would do with them. Lisa, good to see you. So here's what I personally would do with them. So upon first meeting them, you would need to do like a comprehensive like interview. Lo, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. I'm guessing you're coming in from Hawaii, possibly, since you're saying aloha. It's been a long time since I've been there, so, but a very cool place. So you need to do like a comprehensive interview with this person just to know their specific situation and at least their perception of what's going on, so you can kind of have some type of foundation to work off of, okay? So typically, like for example, like I have an assistant that does this, but then I have a follow-up process in which I interview them as well. And typically it would take about 40 minutes, 45 minutes just to do this aspect alone, just to really have empathy for the person and just to really see their problem from their perspective so that you could actually provide them with help. The next thing is, like, I like to actually give them like an HAQ and some other paperwork. So an HAQ gives me like a pretty good overview of what's going on kind of under the hood. So I've used this in a couple of different lives, but an HAQ, like the results of one would look something like this. So I just kind of picked a random one, but the stats you see here, I don't know, it's pretty tough to see, but the stats you see here is pretty representative of the average American in America. And ironically, you see a lot of these red scores. So basically, you know, this chart gives me a good overview of their digestive health, a good overview of their hormonal health, a good overview of their mood and mental health, you know, like if they're having any physical pain or issues as well, or any prostate issues. And basically, when looking at a chart like this, the more red markers you see, the more troubling that is, because the more burden there is on their body, okay? And then the more red markers you see, because there's more burden on their body, their immune system, etc., the more susceptible they are to like obesity, disease, mental and physical pain in their life. So as you can see, this person has quite a few red markers and like a decent amount of green and yellow markers as well. So all of these need to be addressed, and basically all of these would need to be brought down into the green category to help optimize this person's aesthetics as well as their overall health and well-being, okay? And it's very, very important to do all of this to understand what's going on under the hood with a person before prescribing them workouts, because it gives a good base of where they should start. So for example, like this person's, let me take a look at here. So this person's adrenal score, which is this score right here, proved to be through the roof, okay? So it's not gonna make basically any sense of throwing them into like CrossFit type workouts. And remember, like I mentioned, this is pretty much the average person. And this person ironically would tell me they're actually healthy because the standards for health today have obviously lowered so much. What people perceive as healthy is actually full of obesity, disease, mental and physical pain. That's what's perceived as healthy, because unfortunately people working next to them at work most times are just actually far more unhealthy. So it's very important to do this, okay, just to get a base. And we're gonna kind of break this down in a little bit more detail during our live today. But basically the next step after this, you would want to do like some type of postural assessment as well, okay? Just to have like a base of how their body mechanics works, okay? So I use like a lot of the check stuff there. It works well for me. I'm pretty sure there's many other things to use as well that are also good, but it's pretty simple to use, and it basically gives me like a good idea of, you know, do they have like excessive curvature in their cervical spine, thoracic spine, lumbar? Do they have like a misalignment in their pelvis, like one pelvis is higher than the other, or one shoulder is higher than the other, which is very common. And these are going to be important to consider in a person that wants to achieve their goals, but also is describing that they have like a lot of anxiety that they want to work with as well. And then the next one, you know, like the bulk majority of people have like an undiagnosed disc bulge, and any one wrong move causes them to fall into a pattern of clinical pathology. So it's important to do a mechanical assessment on their spine just to see if they have any lingering issues, basically with their back or anything going on there that can kind of injure them during the workout routine. So having said that, that whole entire assessment process takes like 2 to 3 hours. 2 to 3 hours minimum, and that's not even counting the program design, which takes like another hour. So keep that in mind. So next time, you know, you go to a personal trainer that just has you kind of fill out a quick waiver and then throws you into like a group training class with 50 other people that are all unique and have different challenges themselves, you have to question that system because that's incompetence or lack of caring at the best, okay? Make sure to ask like, hey, where's my assessment? How do you know what's going on with me? Did you do the in-depth like postural physiological assessment on me? Did you do like an HAQ to know like if it's even appropriate or if my current adrenal fatigue state can even handle these workouts? Like, how do you even know what to prescribe me without doing that? You're just kind of shooting blanks here. And so make sure to ask for quality because you guys deserve quality, okay? Don't put up with, like, for example, big red flags. If it's the first time a doctor is meeting you and they're spending like 5 to 15 minutes with you, that's an instant red flag to say, thank you for your time, but go and find like a more competent practitioner that actually cares about you. Because remember, I don't care about how much you know until I know about how much you care. And one way of showing that you care for the person, that you're also competent in what you do, is to make sure you have a thorough assessment with the person from the get-go. That's why I mainly do one-on-one coaching and stay away from group training, because I really want to know where this person's starting base is and where they want to be headed. And then we can create a program that's specifically designed for them. Because remember, nature is a novelty generator. Like literally there are no two copies of anything anywhere in nature. Even each individual droplet of water is different. Each individual snowflake is different. And leaves on the same exact bush individually are also different. And that's like the same exact thing with the human being. Each individual human being has significant amounts of differences that make like a huge difference in terms of how they should approach their health and fitness goals, okay? So throwing people in a group training class, for example, without doing this thorough assessment process is, like in my opinion, should not be allowed in the fitness industry as well. Because for example, to be a physical therapist, you have to go to school for so many years and basically pay like about $120,000 to get a PhD in physical therapy to teach people how to use bands, okay? And basically in a lot of these group training classes, they're loading the bar on the back, like heavy weights, etc. They're actually very dangerous, and a lot of people don't know, but you don't need a certification to be a personal trainer or a coach, okay? And a lot of these certifications that they do have, although they do sound fancy, if you look it up online, just kind of Google that name, you will see you can get them simply by doing like a weekend course, like a 1-day or 2-day course, and boom, you're considered a certified trainer. So there's a lot more that goes into it, and but just some things to take into consideration, okay? So let's say after like the complete assessment, so we did the interview, we did the HAQ, we did the postural assessment, we did a pain assessment, and that's just for this individual. Sometimes people have a lot more pathologies, so sometimes you'd have to do a lot more testing just to really get to the etiology of like what's going on with this person so you can come up with the right answer. Because remember, if you have like a wrong hypothesis, you can't come up with the right answer. So you need a right hypothesis to be able to come up with the right answer. And remember, this person is 40 years old, 28% body fat. So they also mentioned through the interview, we found out that he has like social anxiety. He's trying to date, for example, but he feels very consciously aware of his excess body fat, and that makes him socially anxious. Plus he's kind of like not that much of a social person to begin with. So he feels like there's a little bit of awkwardness or something during a conversation. I'm just throwing out random examples, but I'm pretty sure some people could relate to it in one form or another. And then also he experiences like too much work. He feels too overworked, and that's evident. Obviously he's an HAQ, in his HAQ right over here. So you can see his adrenal score is extremely high. So in this case, like just off the bat, and there's a lot more comprehension that needs to go into creating the program. Oh yes, I totally forgot. That's why I write this stuff down. This person also, through a postural assessment, basically we found out he has upper cross syndrome. So that's like very typical in the sense that basically your shoulders are rounded forward and also your head is rounded forward. So that's very typical, and you see that quite a bit, especially, you see that quite a bit in all occupations, but it seems to be more prominent and pronounced in sedentary desk job type environments. And then also a lower cross syndrome, where you see like basically an anterior pelvic tilt, and there's like excessive curvature of the lower back. They kind of look like a Donald duck, for example, and you typically get a lot of tension in the lower back because of that. And massages won't do too much in the grand scheme of things, because if you don't fix that lower cross syndrome, the tension will always keep coming back. So you'll basically be on the chiropractors or the massage therapists like 401k plan or the BMW fund, because you're always coming back and funding them, and the pain's never going away because you never solve the postural deviation that's leading to that specific part of your body to be overloaded. And then also just through some mechanical assessments, so we did some extension tests, for example, and we found out that he has some facet pain in his lower back as well. Most likely, honestly, due to lower cross syndrome, because the facets, they're kind of like posterior elements that are protruding from the back of the spine. So you have the superior and inferior articular process, you have the transverse process and the spinous process. And what happens is when you have that lower cross syndrome, it kind of puts your pelvis in a tilt. It puts a lot of strain on your lower back, and those facets come crashing down on one another, especially if you have some kind of disc height or disc volume loss anywhere in the lower back. So let's just say this person has some disc volume loss in the L4, L5. What happens when you lose volume in the disc? The facets, the bones obviously get closer to one another. And when you lose volume in the intervertebral discs and the bones come close to another, plus you combine that with a lower cross syndrome, which puts your pelvis in a tilt like this and causes the facets, they kind of go like this, and causes the facets to crash into each other, and then it causes kind of like arthritis and a lot of pain in that area, and makes you extension intolerant in this case. Usually get that from my desk and walk up and down the... Yeah, that's great, Michael. Usually what I found actually is just transitioning to a standing desk. I know I've said this before, but it's so important because even if you're sitting for a short amount of time, let's say like 3 or 4 hours a day, and most people are sitting way longer per day because, you have to take into consideration you're sitting when you're eating breakfast, you're sitting, in the bathroom in the morning, you're sitting driving to work if you are going to work still. You're sitting at work, you're sitting driving back from work, probably you're sitting during dinner or watching TV as well. So remember, if you're sitting, I would honestly have to say from my observation, like more than 3 or 4 hours cumulatively per day, there is no amount of like yoga or physical therapy that's ever going to correct your biomechanics. It's just simply not going to happen because you're spending way too much time creating that pathology by sitting in that position, which kind of shortens and lengthens and tightens different parts of your body in an abnormal way that you'll never find in nature, because the Homo sapien has evolved to just be upright. So basically standing up or laying down on the ground, and not in a seated position, which kind of shortens your psoas and then basically creates like a pathology, a ripple effect of pathologies in your entire musculature. And then also there's the passive tissue creep, which increases your chances of injury. So for example, as opposed to common sense, sitting all day and having an office job and working out actually increases your chance of injury. It doesn't decrease your chance of injury. And I get this a lot of times, like people are like, hey, I'm the active guy at work and no one else is working out, but it seems like I'm always getting injured and they're always completely fine. And it might be the case, because if you just sit all day and don't work out, your life will for sure be boring, and you might open yourself to susceptibility in the sense that like if you're moving furniture one day, you might blow your back out because it's just so fragile. But generally speaking, if you're just sitting all day and not working out at all, you're probably not going to get injured, but although your life is obviously going to be very boring in my opinion. But if you take that same sedentary person and all of a sudden make them work out, their chances of injury actually skyrocket through the roof. And I would say if they continue to sit all day and work out like multiple times a week, they will get injured. 100%. It's just a matter of time, but they will get injured, okay? And there's also like a myriad of other issues to consider with sedentary work, such as, for example, like not known thing is basically your body goes into kind of like a hypnotic state when you're doing computer work. And when it goes into this hypnotic state, your visceral tissue kind of just downgrades its activity even more. Visceral tissue, being like the organs, your small intestine, large intestine, liver, kidneys, lungs, heart, etc., brain, except you kind of go on autopilot. And sometimes you kind of get this sensation when you're driving home, you like space out, and then all of a sudden you like wake up out of this trance when you get home, and you're like, whoa, I totally spaced out, and I don't know how I did all this just getting home. So that happens at work, and when in that environment, your body actually burns lower than its base metabolic needs for calories. So a lot of times people think the base metabolism is basically as low as your body would go in terms of burning calories, but it could actually go lower if you fall into these hypnotic trances at work, which is likely to happen, especially if you've been doing the work for quite a while and not changing it up very often. So in my opinion, one good thing that's easy to implement is simply like what I do, for example, is I'll stand for like 2 hours, then sit with the back support for like an hour, then go walk around a little bit, and you're always kind of changing positions. And remember, no one position is the best position. If you just stay in any one position for a long time, that'll always create pathologies. You need to keep in mind that the human body has evolved to have low intensity dynamic movement throughout the whole entire day. So low intensity dynamic movement in the office environment, for example, would be, standing for a little bit, then sitting for a little bit, then instead of sitting upright, you sit with a slight recline a little bit, but with the back support, for example. So in this person's case, he has some kind of irritation with his facets. In his case, he might not want to use the back support because it puts more pressure on the facets. But if a person had a posterior disc herniation or disc bulge and no facet pain, the back support would be a great choice because it would help distribute that tension and that loads throughout the body, throughout the day, so you don't overload any one tissue for prolonged periods of time. Because when you do that, that's when it becomes brittle, and then you could easily surpass your biological tipping point and could cause issues. So, okay, not to go on crazy tangents here. So let me try to get back to this. So yeah, we found out he has upper cross, lower cross, facets. And we found out his goals. At least his goals on the surface. He wanted to lose 28, he's at 28% body fat. He wants to get down to 12% body fat, which is a good number to be at for most males. And he also would like to work on his anxiety. Okay, so here's what I would personally do with this person. He's like 40 years old as well. So since his adrenal score is actually like extremely high, I would have him, as you can see here, and his gut scores are very high as well. So he has a lot of digestive issues. He has, let me see here, it's hard to see it from that. So he has adrenal fatigue. He has a lot of anxiety, you can see here in the red, and he has a lot of anger as well, which go hand in hand. So oftentimes what happens is you have anxiety raise up, and then you have anger raise up, and then if those stay up for prolonged periods of time, depression follows closely behind, okay? And then whenever you have like a mismatch between here, in a sense these scores are very high, it'll actually drag these scores high as well, because basically your gut and brain, well, first and foremost, your mental and physical state is just one unit. A lot of times people tend to try to separate them, but if you become mentally unhealthy, you'll become physically unhealthy. And if you become physically unhealthy, you become mentally unhealthy. So for example, if you have a lot of low-grade chronic inflammation in your body, so remember, inflammation starts in the body and leads to inflammation in the brain. So if you start getting inflammation in your body, you'll start getting inflammation in your brain. And when you start getting inflammation in your brain, what ends up happening is these scores start going up. So you start feeling more anxious, you start feeling more angry and short-tempered. And the longer you are feeling anxious and the longer that persists, adrenal fatigue will follow, okay? Then your sleep will start to suck. Then depression starts going up as well, okay? Then you kind of feel hopeless and lost, etc., etc. So now you have like depression, anxiety, anger, and adrenal fatigue, plus gut issues. And you can see how all of these kind of work in synchrony with one another like an orchestra, okay? And when things start going up, it kind of drags various other biomarkers up as well. So, but one good thing is, one obvious thing is basically, if you actually improve a person's digestive health, it will drag a lot of these scores down. So you can see, like, if this person had anxiety and he just went to a psychologist, it really wouldn't help them, in my opinion, that much. And I've had anxiety as well. I've had social anxiety, for example, to the point of where it made it just very uncomfortable to even go on dates. I would kind of lose my breath trying to talk to the person because I was so anxious and so nervous. So just to give you an idea, like, I have personal experience with that and I know how it feels. So if a person were to go to a psychologist, it would be too limited of an approach because, once again, the human body is a system of systems. And as you can see, this person needs to work on a lot of things to actually improve their anxiety instead of just getting mental coaching from a psychologist, for example. So in this case, also one thing you would want to, not to go on tangents too much, but one thing you would want to consider is the more of these red markers he has, just naturally the more anxious he's going to be, because if this person is dealing with upper cross syndrome, it's causing tightness in his neck, lower cross syndrome, that's causing tightness in his lower back, plus he has those facets in his lower back colliding, so it's causing that arthritis in his lower back. All those things are adding up, because if you have like a very tense physical body, it will make you mentally tense as well. Do you notice, like, when you have like a really good massage, like, for example, how less anxious you feel afterwards? Sure, it didn't get rid of all your anxiety, but it helped quite a bit, okay? Just to give you an idea of how interconnected the human body is, and to always perceive the human body as a system of systems and approach it accordingly like that. So, for example, this person also has a lot of gut issues, okay? So obviously having constipation, having that pain, etc., that's going to be another burden that the person is dealing with all day, every day. So obviously it's taxing, it's fatiguing, it's causing energy loss, which is increasing his adrenal score. Then obviously when you're in a fatigue state, your brain perceives stresses as more stressful than they actually are, especially when you start losing quality sleep, etc. So you would want to correct that as well, okay? So we'd be focusing on that also. And then let me see here. So on top of, we'd want to correct his, so let's say he has an anxiety rating, let's just give it a 10, okay? A 10 out of 10 right now. So if we correct his upper cross syndrome and get rid of the tension in his neck, get rid of that pain in his neck, if we correct his lower cross syndrome and get rid of that tension in his lower back, for example, and get rid of those, basically at that point too, the facets of the lower back aren't going to be touching, Michael, I will, that's a complicated question. I'll try to address it in a second. We'll get to the gut thing right after this, okay? So basically we corrected that and the facets are no longer colliding with each other. Now all of a sudden he doesn't have all this tension in his posterior chain, in his upper neck, in his lower back. Of course that's going to help him, okay? That's going to relieve a lot of physical pain the person is having every day. So now instead of having an anxiety score of like 10, the person will have an anxiety score of like 7. Okay, because he'll have musculature that's more relaxed and more aligned with good body biomechanics. He's also going to be, obviously you want to coach them on proper movement, because remember, when a person runs into all of these situations here, you have to address the belief system that led to all these problems. Because if you don't address the belief system that led to all these problems, you're basically building a really good house on top of a shitty foundation. The belief system is the foundation, and if you don't work on the belief system that once again led to all these problems, and you build the house on top of it, even if it's a good house, even if it's well constructed, don't be too surprised if the house collapses eventually. And this is super common, especially with fat loss journeys. I mean, how many times, guys, have you seen people lose weight just to gain it because they kind of are too narrow-sighted and are brainwashed by the fitness industry to think that all you have to do is just work out and eat a little bit better to find your ideal health, to achieve your ideal body. It's not the case, okay? You have to do so many more things to really get to the etiology of what led you to become overweight to begin with, and what led to all of these problems, and B, how to actually correct all of these problems. Notice that all of these problems will not be corrected with just working out and nutrition alone, okay? And if they're not, the problem will always come back because your foundation still sucks. So let's see here. So yeah, another things we would work on is basically going back to the basics. I mean, you guys have to understand, The human body, the Homo sapien. So first of all, there have been like 28 plus different human species that have come and gone. Some of them were around for hundreds of thousands of years, if not like a million plus years, and they just like vanished, okay? And the Homo sapien, which is basically who we are, has been around for about like 200,000 years or so. And it started in East Africa and kind of now they migrated throughout the entire world basically, but basically initially into Europe and the Asian continent, and then went into the Americas, etc., etc. But for 200,000 years, they've evolved in what kind of environment? I mean, the environment was basically, let's take into consideration the area where I'm from, like Ukraine. So what was the environment like pre-farming? So before 10,000 years ago, or like way back when they were still hunting mammoths. People were out in nature 24/7, and most importantly, they didn't have an exposure to low-grade chronic stress, which is actually like a huge negative to your health. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. So the human central nervous system has basically evolved to deal with peaks of pretty intense stress. So for example, hunting a mammoth is pretty damn stressful. It's like a huge elephant size beast that's like very aggressive as well. And as you're hunting that with your tribesmen, of course, it's going to be very intense, and your adrenaline is going to be through the roof. Your adrenal glands, for example, sit on top of your kidneys. They produce cortisol, etc. And cortisol is great. It's great in short intervals, because without cortisol, basically you'll be like in a zombie state. And in fact, like when you do have adrenal fatigue, it is because your body just stopped producing cortisol and kind of basically just reserving it, because your body has a limited supply of that. And it tries to reserve it. You have to remember also your brain is encased in a skull. It never actually sees the outside world. It uses its 5 human senses to see the outside world and to gather information, and then to make the appropriate response to allow you to survive. Because remember, biologically speaking, I mean, the only things you have to worry about is basically acquiring resources to survive, getting rid of waste, and also reproducing. So I mean, biologically speaking, that's really your only purpose on the planet. Obviously, human beings are a bit more complicated than that, or maybe they're not. Maybe they make it more complicated than they are. I think there's a little bit of truth in everything there. But those are basically your 3 things. And your brain is encased inside of your skull. It never sees the outside world. So from its evolutionary perspective, it still perceives you as basically in the forest as a hunter-gatherer, and it makes appropriate responses from there, okay? So going back to, pre-farming and pre-cultivation or domestication of animals, for example, in crops, what's a typical day look like in a hunter-gatherer? They get up, maybe once a month they go hunt like a huge animal, which is very stressful, no doubt. But then in between, they have many weeks or many months of literally nothing going on. They fish, they hang out in their tribe, they're maybe working like a handful of hours a day, in the sense that they're repairing huts or whatever, moving their tent around, since they're probably nomadic at that point still, or repairing tools, attending to the tribe, socializing a lot, being exposed to the elements, in the sense that they're being exposed to the sun, they're being out in nature all day, they're in touch with the soil, etc., etc. And that's how the central nervous system has actually evolved to function. Unfortunately, today, what you have is, most of the time, unless you're obviously in a war zone, then you have high-grade chronic stress. But most of the time, what you have is low-grade chronic stress that's on blast all year round, 365 days a year, followed by peaks of high-grade chronic stress. So the hunter-gatherer just had these high-grade chronic stress followed by nothing, but the modern man, for example, has low-grade chronic stress on blast all year, plus these peaks. So for example, let's just say in this case, this person is a computer scientist. Okay, so he's 40 years old, 28% body fat, and he's a computer scientist. So let's just say he's a high-ranking guy too, so he's getting paid very well, but he also has a lot of demand on him from the company, because, for example, like if something comes up and he can't fix it ASAP, then the company starts losing a lot of money very quickly unless it gets fixed. So for example, like, on Amazon, all of a sudden the server went down and people can't order. Obviously, if that doesn't get fixed ASAP, then the company starts losing a lot of money. So they put a lot of pressure on this computer science guy to fix it right away, which is very stressful on the person, okay? And then when you combine, let's just say the person is driving to work, that's also very, very stressful actually on the central nervous system, because your central nervous system has to be amped up to be able to stay in the lanes. And obviously it's stressful getting on the freeway, especially if you're stuck in traffic. You have this person honking at you, this person cutting you off, and all these little stresses, they don't seem like much. I know they don't seem like much, but these are the things that actually deteriorate your health quite a bit, okay? It's all these little things, but throughout the whole entire day. Then the person gets to work, and for example, you always have, this one employee that's falling behind schedule, or this incompetent boss that drives you nuts. That's producing a heightened stress response as well. So on top of, being stressful, driving to work because you're in traffic, then you get to work, the annoyance of coworkers or an incompetent boss, and just the demand of like having a lot of projects as well is very like wear and tear on your central nervous system. Then the person has like coffee midday, for example, which spikes your cortisol even more. Then they drive back, they hit another 2 hours of traffic. Let's say they almost get in a car accident, so it's once again low-grade chronic stress, but then almost in a car accident, boom, high-grade chronic stress. And let's say at work too, the computer science guy kind of messed something up. Radex, good to see you. Lisa, good to see you. The computer science guy messed something up at work, and then the boss chewed him out. So boom. So you can see what I'm describing. A constant blast of low-grade chronic stress followed by valleys of high-grade, or followed by peaks of high-grade chronic stress. And this is actually what destroys people's health. This is kind of what's referred to as basically the new smoking. And it's very, very common in modern society, okay? And it's oftentimes the toughest thing a person can do to regain their health is getting them out of that environment, because no matter how much psychological coaching you have or how much holistic coaching you have, just at the end of the day, most people's central nervous system, and when I say most, at least from my observation, like 98+% of people's central nervous system can't deal with that kind of environment, and they get burned out. They have a lot of physical and mental issues, especially a few years after working in that environment. I used to do a lot of corporate lectures, and although these people told me they were healthy, I did have a bunch of them take this HAQ, maybe like 250 plus corporate workers, and I could tell you the average person looked something like this, and their body fat was very, very high. So when you're running into this much pathology, there's something clearly going on in that environment that's causing this much pathology, and some of the things that are going on and some of the things that I hinted at right now. So, and the sad part is these same people would probably try to go do CrossFit or try to go do Orange Theory or something silly like that, when you can see this person's burned out. Last thing they need is more intense exercise. Because remember, exercising requires energy. It doesn't give you energy. I don't know where people got that from. It requires you to have energy to be able to work out. So if you don't have energy and you're already burned out and have upper cross, lower cross syndrome, facet pain, etc., it doesn't make any sense to throw this person into intense workouts. What he should be doing probably are either, it depends on his state of mind and his personality, but maybe working in exercises for a few weeks to balance everything out while working on a lot of other lifestyle variables, and then slowly phase into a workout program. Or, there's so many other things you can do, but that's just like one quick example, okay? But you can see at the end of the day why something like this is so important. So your health practitioner needs to not necessarily be doing this, but they need to have a comprehensive system in place that gauges at where your starting place is and be able to objectively measure how you're actually progressing throughout the program. Because if you're not doing that, you're just relying on dumb luck. And you can see in terms of the state of America's health these days, basically anywhere you walk outside, and you guys can do this, we're on the weekend now. Adrian, good to see you. Making good gains, dude. I'm happy for your progress. Basically anywhere you go outside these days in America, 9 out of 10 people you run into are full of obesity and disease. full of mental and physical pain. So just to give you an idea, I'm 15% body fat, 15 to 16% body fat. And I look way leaner than pretty much the bulk majority of people you run into on the street. And 20% body fat is already overweight, okay? So, and you can't be overweight without having like a lot of mental and physical pain that's leading to that chronic inflammation, and which is required to gain all that weight. So just put A and B together and use some common sense, okay, guys? Okay, we talked about the central nervous system. So basically that would need to be addressed if this person really wants true healing instead of managing symptoms his whole entire life. Because if he just stays in that environment, chances are he's just going to be running after symptoms his whole life. It's this today, that tomorrow. You know, it's back pain and neck pain today, gut pain tomorrow, high blood pressure the next day, high cholesterol the next day, this and that, which is super awesome for the pharmaceutical industry because they love sick people because they don't make money off healthy people, okay? So they like you to stay in that pathological environment, which leads to all that physical and mental pathology. So there's that. And okay, central nervous system, boom, boom, boom. So sleep is obviously super important too. So I'd look at this person, I'll be like, okay, so this person has, you know, adrenal fatigue. We look at his sleeping schedule. Sometimes he's going to sleep at noon or midnight. Sometimes he's going to sleep at 10 p.m. Sometimes he's going to sleep at 2 a.m., et cetera, et cetera. So that would need to be standardized. There's so much that needs to be done there, and I don't want to turn this live into too long of a video. But in that case, you know, I'll tell him, hey, your body repairs itself physically from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and mentally from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. So let's say he's even fairly diligent and he's like, well, I'm falling asleep every day at 11 p.m. Okay, cool. So even if you're falling asleep at 11 p.m., so first of all, the little details are if you're bed at 11 p.m., you're probably really falling asleep at like midnight. So in that case, but let's just say you're a fast sleeper, so you fall asleep right away, so 11 p.m. it is. Okay, cool. Well, guess what? Even if you're falling asleep at 11 p.m., multiply that by 7 days in a week, and you lost 7 hours of sleep in 1 week, okay? That's 28 hours of sleep every single month. So basically per week, you're losing 1 day's worth, 1 full day's worth of physical repair time. Basically, remember we said your body repairs itself physically from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And every single week, you're losing 1 full day. No wonder this person is chronically tired and chronically fatigued, as you can see here by the score. So that would need to be worked on as well, okay? Obviously, you would need to work on this person's gut health also to bring these scores down tremendously. Because the good thing is, honestly, if you just bring these scores down and improve the person's digestive health, all of these scores will fall down. Well, maybe not the scores leading to that facet pain, et cetera, but 100% guaranteed that his anger score will go down. His anxiety score will definitely go down as well, okay? And also his adrenal score will go down also. So imagine if you're kind of now combining all of those systems we talked about, how great this person's HAQ will look at the end of a program. So for example, at the end of 3 months coaching with me, I would typically take a person that looks like this and put them all in the green at the end. And it's just a 3-month period. It's not that long. Of course, some clients take longer, but that would be honestly the average, and it's fairly easy to do with good holistic coaching and good program design. So, cool. I'm trying to take a look at here. Okay, so we got a lot of things addressed. Obviously, there's a lot more that needs to be addressed with this person, but I'm trying to kind of hint and give you guys an idea of the importance of approaching a person's health with an understanding that the human being is a system of systems. And if any one of those systems are messed up, the whole entire person's health will be messed up, and you'll never be able to help them find their health. Just like a company, you have many different departments, and if any one of those departments stops working, I guarantee you the whole company will go out of business. Even if it's the janitorial staff, for example. If they stop working, you know, who's going to fix the lights? Who's going to make sure the toilets are working? If they're not working, okay, well, we can get someone else at work to do it. That's the common sense approach, but okay. But then they'll be less productive at their job, which will lead someone else to be less productive at their job, which will make it hard for the company to be competitive, and they wouldn't be able to produce products on time or on on schedule, and the company will eventually go out of business. Try to view the human being as the same exact way, okay? Like if you're working out, but you're constantly stressed, fatigued, you have gut issues, you're still all fucked up. Or if you don't have gut issues and, you know, you're not stressed out, but you're not working out or you're not taking care of your body physically, okay, you're still all fucked up. You're still gonna fall into a cycle of obesity, disease, and physical and mental pain. Or let's say you are working out and you have great gut health, but you're just constantly chronically tired because your sleep sucks. Well, you're still all fucked up. Okay, or let's just say you have you're working out a lot, but you have lower back pain. Okay, well, you're still all fucked up. That's how it happens, and pain in one area will eventually lead to a cascade of problems throughout your whole entire body because everything is interconnected, okay? All right, so, and then just as a side note, some other things that would need to be addressed with the person is, does he have any love-hate relationships that are causing his anxiety, or any story gap, for example, or how does his surroundings look like? Like if all his friends are full of obesity, disease, anxiety, or in a belief system that's leading to that anxiety. So for example, there's, especially in corporate culture, since we used this example of this 40-year-old male that's a computer programmer. So most corporate cultures, at least that I'm familiar with, and I've done a lot of corporate lectures, they're kind of like, unless you're dying for your job, you're not doing your job. And there's a lot of guilt with, for example, someone that takes an hour or 2 hour break to go to the gym midday and some project needs to be done. The whole team will make this person kind of feel guilty that he's not at his computer or working or something of that sort. Then there's also this kind of nasty culture around nutrition in corporate offices. So you see a lot of junk food being delivered and given to employees for free, for example. Though it's not free, it really is just taken out of your pay. And then unfortunately, because of that environment, like I mentioned, literally the average corporate worker looks even worse than this. And I've had hundreds of them take this HAQ, so I could objectively actually prove that. The standards for what health and wellness in that environment is just so low. It's comical. It's comical. And unfortunately too, they're just so delusional because they've been in that life for so long that they actually think they're healthy. And I rarely had anyone that filled out their HAQ like this tell me they're not healthy. That's the sad part, because a lot of people at their office are even more fucked up than that. So compared to them, of course they look healthy, but in reality, the bulk of them are a complete mess. And unfortunately, they get into things like keto, fasting, all these gimmick and BS things, or Orange Theory, CrossFit, and it's sad to see them do that. And they do that for years and years and years, and it doesn't work long term, but they still keep doing it. I don't know why. Anyways, I hope that helps you guys understand in terms of one approach to anxiety. I've had a tremendous amount of success with clients getting rid of their anxiety and helping them with their body fat and their aesthetics, etc., just by following this holistic approach of seeing the person as a system of systems. And it's worked well for me as well. So I've had terrible anxiety in the past, and I don't even remember the last time I've had issues with anxiety at all. So there's so much more that needs to be done, but I'm just giving you guys an idea of kind of at least how to have a general idea of approaching the situation so that you're not a drifter your whole entire life and just kind of chasing endless symptoms and silly diets like keto and fasting and CrossFit and Orange Theory. When I hear those things, I just kind of cringe. And I already know the person has failed. They've already failed, or they're on path to failing when they try those things. So let me know if you guys have any questions. Put them in the comments section. I'll try my best to address them. Next week, we're going to be doing a really in-depth video on how to find quality produce, which has become super difficult in the US, much more difficult than you think, okay? And we're going to do an in-depth breakdown on how to do that. Okay, hope everyone's well. My dad's visiting. It's his birthday, so I'm going to go out to lunch with him right now. That's why I had this pathetic attempt at putting on a tie, which hasn't worked out too well, but Hope everyone's well. Thank you all for showing up to these videos. I enjoy seeing every single one of you, okay? All right, guys, take care. Whoa, take care.